Welcome to how to interview for the job that you want and get it. And I asked some of the folks up front, but I wanted to ask the whole audience, just get a gauge, how many people would be new to the job market and have not interviewed really at all? Okay. People with some interview experience but looking to polish your skills? Okay, I guess the bulk of the audience. Okay, that's good. Just to introduce myself, I've spent 15 years as a professional speaker. I've also managed people, I've interviewed people, I've gone on interviews. I've changed careers 3 times, so I was able to configure my story and my brand in such a way that I could convince people that they wanted to hire me even though I didn't have direct experience for the jobs that they were offering. So that's why I am here, and I wanted to share with you all what it is I wanted to go through this afternoon during the hour that we have. And an hour really isn't a hell of a lot. I will want to entertain questions, but I'll probably have to keep things moving pretty quickly to cover everything that I would like to cover with you all. So, starting with the best way to prepare, and then moving on to handling difficult questions, negotiating the money you deserve. We like that one. How to leave the jitters behind, and also what to do when you walk out the door, which is, of course, one of the most important things. It's not just making a good impression when you're there, but it's what you would call a post-sell. Once you finish the interview, how do you want to reinforce the professional impression that you made with the folks that had a chance to meet you? So, as someone who's done a lot of speaking, I wanted to start with a central presentation question in terms of getting your head in the right place and doing preparation, which is, what is your purpose? When you go on an interview, what is your purpose? Takers? Wow them? To get the job. To sell yourself. Okay. All right, all of those are moving around a definition that I have, which I invite you to use or not as you see fit. But what I have had in the front of my mind when I've gone on interviews and when I'm prepared for interviews is this: to showcase my qualifications, which is basically what many of you have said, but also and my ability to help you achieve your goals. There's a principle in public speaking when they talk about being you-centric. In other words, when you talk, just to talk about yourself, always keep a focus on how can I help you? If I have credentials or background or a strong academic experience or volunteer experience or whatever it is that you're bringing to the table, you don't want to just want to talk about that. So it's not just selling yourself, it's selling how you can help that organization achieve its goals, or even how you can help that individual hiring manager who is talking to you achieve their goals. Does that make sense? So keep that in mind, because everything you're going to do when you're speaking to someone in an interview is going to center around that. So when you're selling yourself, what you're selling is, I can help you look good to your bosses. I can help you achieve the corporate goals that have been set forth by your board of directors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not just me and all about me, it's about how I can help you. Okay, research. Some of you have interview experience, so once you are approaching a company for an interview, how do you research them? What do you do to go about researching a company? Louder, please. Go on their website. Okay. What else? Hi. Okay. So Wikipedia, Glassdoor, in other words, leveraging the net. Okay, obviously articles that may appear in the media, et cetera, as was mentioned. What else can you do? Look at their products? Right. So now I would assume that you would get that information, say, from the net. Okay. Okay. Or take that to another level, using them or speaking to people who use the products. Okay, exactly. What about an annual report? An annual report is going to lay out accomplishments of the prior year and goals for the upcoming year. A lot of people never bother to acquaint themselves with what it is the company is trying to achieve strategically. Keep in mind, what your goal is to show them how you can leverage your experience, your skills, your know-how, your motivation to help them achieve what they want to achieve. If you are conversant or can drop at any point into an interview the fact that you know that one of the goals for this year is X, not only are you positioning yourself very effectively, they're saying, all right, this person does their homework. And you are distinguishing yourself or giving yourself what I'll later go into in more detail, which is a brand. Make sense? Okay. What else? What else have people here done to research organizations? You're all smart people. Okay, that's great. How do you do that? Okay, so networking to reach out and get to know employees who work there, which is great also because you want to work at a place where you're going to be happy. You want to work at a place that's solid. It's not a startup that's going to have started out next year. That's out of funding. So networking and knowing employees who can give you that information is really helpful. How else can you meet other employees? LinkedIn is a great suggestion. Okay. Professional associations. I'll be honest with you all, I am amazed that I do group after group and no one thinks of professional associations. Professional associations oftentimes have mentorship programs. Okay? These are folks that are perfectly happy to tell you how you can avoid the mistakes that they made in their professions. If they don't know someone who works at the company, they probably know someone who knows someone who works at the company. Or they may know of a job opportunity that's not being advertised, that's not public yet. Okay? So really, take advantage of professional associations. Many of them have groups or opportunities to reach out to young professionals or people who are new to the profession, people who are at your stage, in other words. So they always want to encourage the next generation of leadership in their profession. So professional associations are a great way to network, not just knowledge about the company, the customers, et cetera, what the strategic goals are, but also to find out what jobs there are. And by the way, this is not, if I had a half day, I'd go more into this, but when I've done this workshop before, half the questions that I've gotten after the workshop aren't about interview skills, they're about how do I figure out what I want. Now, as I said, I'm not going to deal with that right now, but that's something you need to be clear on, is what it is that you want professionally and where you want your career to take you. Because chances are an employer or prospective employer who's interested in you is going to try to find out, well, where does this person see themselves going? If you hit a wall in an interview and you say, well, you know, I'm not really sure, you're putting yourself in a category right away that you don't want to be in. On the other side, if you know that this is the job with the company that is addressing all of your needs, that is just where you want to be at this stage in your life, you're going to have so much passion in your interview that you're probably going to wipe out memory of all the other candidates. So that's something that's really, really important to do, is to focus on what it is that you want. Define that. Be clear. I mentioned I've changed careers 3 times. Believe me, if your career path takes you one place and 5 years later you're like, I don't want to be here. That's happened to me twice. Then you say, okay, well, let me configure my skills and see, with the background that I have, where can I apply these? Where is this experience valuable? And with the knowledge that I've built up, where do I believe I would be more happy? What type of culture? What type of activity? But really, do yourself the favor of being clear and defined about what it is that you want. And if it turns out that what you thought you want isn't what you thought it would be, then you can always change your career, move in another direction. And by the way, the people that you meet through professional associations, et cetera, those are kinds of people that you can say, hey, I've always wanted to do this. That's so cool. And they may look right in your face and say, yeah, I know it sounds cool. Believe me, it's not. Okay? I always thought a job with traveling would be just the coolest, sexiest thing. I traveled for 15 years. The only reason I didn't stop after 2 was because I got addicted to the points. But believe me, if you travel for a living, it's very hard on you, it's very stressful, it's hard to maintain friendships. Believe me, it was one of those cases where what I thought would be so sexy, wow, international travel, they paid me to go to London, isn't that fabulous? Yeah, the first time it was. And after a while, it just gets really tired. But I could have found that out ahead of time if I'd spoken to someone who was doing what I wanted to do, and they would have said, okay, this is the way it is. This is what's good about it. This is what sucks. And interestingly enough, in my case, the international travel was something that only was sexy for a year or two. What other ways do you have of networking? Networking for people, networking for job opportunities. Trade shows, professional conferences, that's very good. Oftentimes they'll have boards that are up, or you can meet people or hear people that are there. Don't be shy about getting business cards. People like that. I know when I was younger, I thought, oh, nobody wants to talk to me. I'm just this kid. I don't want to ask for a business card. Do it. And it's very flattering when someone, especially a young person, comes up to you and says, could I get your business card, please? Or could I speak to you about what you do? That's one other thing that I wanted to go into. Has anybody here done an informational interview? Okay, one person, two people. You don't count because you're a professional person. So he said, I'm sorry, say, what is your field again?
Employment specialist.
Employment specialist, all right. So he's a ringer here. Okay, so yes, of course he's done informational interviews. Do you belong to a professional association? I knew it. So he could probably give this workshop, actually. But yeah, by all means, make sure that you are, as I said, it's very, very flattering if someone calls you up and says, you know, one day I'd like to be you. I would love to do what you do. Would it be possible for me to take perhaps 10 minutes and discuss your career and how you got to where you are? And that's important too. Put a time limit on it, because if you're talking to someone who's successful, they probably have a very restricted calendar. And you can get a lot of sexy information in 10 minutes. Fact is, they may say, all right, I'll give you 10 minutes. If they like you, they'll give you 20 or a half an hour. Okay. You can also say, well, if you get to that point where they say, yes, I would be willing to talk to you, say, that's great. When would be convenient? See if you would offer to drop by their office, and don't be surprised if they say, no, we'll do it on the phone. They may not want you in the office. That's fine. But if you have a chance to meet with them face-to-face, then you've really hit a home run. And also, again, make sure you get contact information. And as far as follow-up is concerned, when you get an informational interview, besides making all the notes and reviewing them right after that phone call or that meeting, write a thank you note or email. Let me ask our specialist here, do you have any preference as to whether someone does a follow-up by email, digitally, or in hard copy?
The preference nowadays is digitally.
Okay.
Handwritten note obviously looks very, very nice and it's surprising, but because of time frame and capacity, digital thank you notes are very well appreciated too.
Okay. Thank you. I was brought up differently, but I'm the only one here with a white hair, so I wanted to ask that. What else? Did anyone here go to school? Do you have alumni associations? Okay. Many alumni associations will have mentorship programs. I know because I worked in higher ed and I started one. That's one of the benefits that you have of being an alum, and one incentive you have of getting them to pay dues to belong to your alumni association. But oftentimes, same thing, alumni associations are there to help you. Their whole purpose is to keep you engaged in the university community. And they should be able to provide you with information on who does what you want to do in the market where you want to do it. And by the way, if everybody's like really happy here in the Bay Area, terrific. But don't forget, when you're defining what it is that you want to do and where you want to be, think about where geographically. Have you ever thought London would be cool, New York would be cool, or the last place on earth you'd like to live is New York? Whatever, be clear on that too. I was born in New York, so I'm a big New York fan. Worked in DC, I thought that would be fun. I found out that what Catherine Graham, the owner of the Washington Post, said is true. Washington, D.C. is a suburb masquerading as a city. but it had a good job. But when I was offered a chance to come to San Francisco, believe me, I snapped it up, and I've been here 13 years and been very happy ever since. One last thing, especially since we're talking about higher ed, faculty. If you had a mentor or just anybody, even if it was someone you couldn't stand, if they're in your field and they're well connected, you want to talk to that person. Having worked extensively in higher ed, I'll tell you point blank, is there anyone here who's in academia? Oh, good. They're insufferably arrogant. And they need to let you know repeatedly that they know so much more than you do about what they're talking about. It's worthwhile putting up with that because those type of egos love audiences. And again, if a young person comes in and says, I would like to find out, get some guidance from you as to a good person to speak to or a good next step, they'll love it. You may not love the time you spend with them, but you will get good information. It's worthwhile. Make sense? Okay, cool. And the other half of this, as you can see, because I know you're all smart and you can read, is that part of your interview process, you do want to prepare questions for them. It's not just about them asking you questions. It's also about, and eventually they may say, do you have any questions for us? And yeah, you want to have at least 3 questions for them. 3, I think, is just a nice, again, I'll go to my specialist here.
Prepare 6.
Why do you say 6?
Because you're going to ask 3 of them, but in the process of them asking you questions in the interview, they may answer some of your questions that you already written down, and you don't want to look kind of blank when you say, I have any questions, because they've already answered your 3. So prepare 6 questions that you want to know about them, the employer, and the interviewee, or interviewer, excuse me, and that way you have at least the 3.
Okay. And that's a good point, because if your questions have been answered, you want to be in a position to say, my questions were A, B, and C, but you've answered them in the course of the interview. So again, you always sound like you're on top of things. You're not sounding vague or like you really don't know what you want to, what objectives you have from the interview itself. Question? I'm sorry, Warren.
On that, if you are asking a question about who your direct supervisor would be in the new position, and you're being interviewed by HR, is that going to be an issue? Because they might not know the supervisor.
Well, let me ask why would you want to know the name of the
Not the name, but I mean, people don't, they say that people don't leave jobs, they leave supervisors, managers, because some managers are really bad and have a hard time retaining people. So that's why I want to know about my manager.
I see. Okay, so if it says, oh, well, you know, your direct manager would be Daniel, like, oh, that prick, oh, forget it.
Well, like, when's the last time that the manager I'd be working for has gone to bat for something that one of their employees felt needed to get done?
Okay, do you think that serves your purpose to position yourself as someone with excellent qualifications who can get them closer to their goals by asking that question?
No. But I do think that it addresses whether or not you're able to work well with others and are cognizant of who you're working with.
Okay, I'll be honest with you, as you can say, I have mixed feelings about that, because what that's saying is like, I'm not interested in you, I'm interested in me. Now, the only thing that I will say about that is that different industries have different cultural things. I've heard some folks in IT that have asked the most, people being interviewed that have made the most spectacularly arrogant impressions, and they've been hired. Okay, in the worlds that I come from, in terms of being a sales engineer, in terms of higher education, even in marketing and advertising, which I did in New York, a question like that would put up a question mark in my mind. It's like, well, why is this guy asking me this? It doesn't sound like he wants to be part of a team. He wants to be part of the team that he wants to create, and he may be out of here in 6 months. So I'm not saying you shouldn't ask that question. I'm just bringing up potential things that might be reasons that you might want to consider the impression you're making by the questions that you ask. Would you say that's fair? Okay. Did you? Yeah.
I was just going to say, I have been on the interviewer side.
Yes.
For hundreds of interviews. I've
Okay.
only had to do 6 myself in like 42 years.
That's not fair.
If I get to that stage,
And I think that's I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Shannon.
Shannon. I think that's excellent. You can say, you said, when they answered your question, that you were looking to expand your sales 16%. Can I ask how you were planning to do that? Was that geographically? Did you have some cool functionality that was coming up? Or just continued probing? Because what you're doing is showing, I'm smart and I think strategically like you. So thank you for bringing that up. That's really good. I mentioned brand earlier. Anybody here have any marketing experience? Okay, so then you all know what brand is. Brand basically is, well, who am I and how am I distinguished? How am I better than the other people in the marketplace that people could select as customers? Only this time, the people they're selecting are people. So you want to think, and sometimes depending on your mindset, this can be challenging. You can ask yourself, what makes me distinctive? What makes me distinctive / better? What makes me a really attractive candidate? And what is different about me than other people? Does your brand have to always relate directly to your professional life? No, it does not. I have lots of things that I'd love to entertain you by bragging about that I've achieved professionally. Let me tell you what sticks in every prospective employer's mind when I bring it up. I'm a former Jeopardy champion. They want to hear about that. They don't care how much money that I raised. They don't care how many millions of dollars I sold. They don't care about the really cool, very high up people that I've dealt with, like David Rockefeller and Henry Kissinger. They care, you were on Jeopardy? Wow. And I'll bet each one of you here $1,000 when they review all the resumes for the positions that I've interviewed in, they'll talk about, and what about, remember the guy who was on Jeopardy? Okay, never mind everything else, that's what's gonna stick out. That's part of my brand, and I always make it a point to find some way to bring that up, to ease that into the conversation that I have with my prospective employer, because that's part of what will distinguish me and make me stand out. Now, obviously, you leverage that with some very serious professional experience, but anything like that, including, how many people here have done volunteer work? Okay, most of you here have done volunteer work. That's very cool. Find a way to bring that up. You look like you're ready to say something.
I'm just waiting it out. Since we're at a gamer convention, guild leadership is big. Brave leadership is big. Go ahead and say, hey, you may know, you may look at my, different color hair or whatever, you may think I'm a gamer. Yeah, actually, I've been playing World of Warcraft for 10 years, and I'm a raid leader, and I have a guild of X number of working mythic. If you think that the person can, can understand what it is you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Because I hired a guy because I asked about hobbies, and he said, well, actually I play video games, and I said, cool, me too, which is not what you're expecting to hear. But then he said, I lead a guild of 250 actual people, and I've been a raid leader for 7 years. And I said, you have leadership experience, you're exactly what I want. That's your hobby can be an application of that. So don't downplay your gaming experience if you have someone who understands what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, that's great because it's so pertinent to this audience here. But really, so many different things, and I agree, you would be surprised at some people who say, oh, really? I do that too. Or my son or my daughter, they're into that too. Tell me something about it. But again, it's a connection. And let's face it, at the end of the day, if you're interviewing for a good job that a lot of people want, it can be more and more challenging to make yourself distinctive. But if you form that connection, if that person likes talking to you and remembers you, they're going to be much more likely to have a very positive impression of you as a candidate for that position than they would someone else who has competitive credentials, but they didn't make that connection with during the interview. Hi.
One question I've seen some people suggest put on your resume, I was Times Person of the Year in, I think it was 2006. True, but it sounds like a lie, and they say it because Time put everyone as Person of the Year that year. Is makes you look like a liar, or it's just too general, or it makes you stand out?
It makes you look like someone who does hokey tricks on their resume. Other questions? Oh, by the way, since you're talking about resumes, I'll bring up something else. I think most people here are probably too smart for this. But I got letters that are similar to that you employ tricks that someone must have read in a book, like, Dear Mr. Bannin, stop right here, paragraph. I am the person you were going to hire for this job. That letter, I didn't even bother to read the rest of it. And I just felt like, I thought if that person called me up, I would say, look, whatever book you read that told you to do that, don't. But really, sometimes some well-meaning person will tell you something like that. Or, send your resume Federal Express to show that you're really motivated. Well, we don't do that anymore, but just things like that, it's like, no. You just, if you're professional and confident, you don't have to resort to cheesy tricks like that.
I have a related question.
I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Will.
What are your thoughts on like putting a little bit of like humor/personality in your resume? How hard to go?
That's an interesting question because I have a very close friend who's a graduate of the Harvard Business School. And at the very end where you have what I think is superfluous, but something else where he put additional information. He said, X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. And I love a good tiramisu. And I said, oh, well, that's a nice little splash of lavender at the end of your resume. But the problem with something like that is that you don't know how people will respond because you're not there. So I think if you try something like that, you're taking a risk that can blow up in your face. So I would question something like that. A resume is a professional document. It's your CV. I wouldn't put it in, I would not do something humorous unless you felt that you had a strong enough connection with the interviewer. I wouldn't put something humorous in a follow-up email either. You can be funny in person if you know that you really are funny and you're getting the type of response. But if you can't see how they're responding, then it's not a good idea. When you're doing your prep, if you can answer these 5 questions, you will walk in the door so confident that they will probably find you irresistible. Tell me about yourself. Open-ended questions are the toughest type of questions, and they're absolute quicksand traps. Because inexperienced interviewers most likely will be, oh, you want me to tell you about myself? Gee, where should I start? Do you want to hear where I was born? Is that what you're looking for? They'll ramble. They will try to throw the question back to the interviewer to get some guidance as opposed to just taking control of it. They will give information that's tangential or open up a big box of something that you really don't want to go into. They usually don't know when to stop talking. You want to have a nice, concise response to something like that, and you want it all to come back to your purpose. So let's say my big field is communication. Let's say we're interviewing for a communications position. And the interviewer said to me, ask me that question.
Tell me about yourself.
Okay, well, I was born in New York City. I was fortunate enough to have a mother who really loved the theater, and she took me to lots of shows. And I think that's when I first developed my fascination with communication, because I watch those actors on the stage and I think, I would love to do what they do. And how can I master the magic that they have? What happened after that, that led me to majoring in theater when I was in college. And then after that, I decided I didn't really want to do theater professionally. It was too unstable. I was looking for a corporate environment where I could have a strong career path for me, but something that was still creative. That's why I chose advertising, and that's why I'm here today. Period. Okay? Something nice and concise like that, and it all comes back to your purpose. Okay? Does that make sense? So anytime, expect them to throw you a curveball like that, and I'll give you a few others. And seriously, I would urge you, when I was first interviewing, I got a legal pad, and I wrote out answers to potential questions, and then as I did more interviews, some questions that really threw me for a loop, and I didn't want to be in a position where I wasn't prepared for them again, so I've always remembered them. Why do you want to work here? Now that goes back to the research and the types of facts that you can drop from the research that you've done. And you don't want to say, I spent 3 hours on the internet researching your company. You just want to talk about the company. You want to make it seem very smooth and very easy, but show that you're conversant in what they do, and then bring it back to the skills that you have that show that here's what you do, and here's how my skills and my ambitions fit into what you do, and how I can help you reach the goals that I know that you have. Very similar, but again, something that you probably, if you haven't already been asked, why should I hire you? So this again goes back to not just your qualifications, but your brand. As well as, again, linking what you know about the company with how you can help that company achieve its goals. This is a bullshit question. We all know this. It's like asking, so what's your favorite color? If you were a flower, which flower would you be? This is an HR question. If a hiring manager asked me that question, I would really consider if I want to work for that person. But HR people ask questions like this. My last job, I was actually asked, Richard, can you tell me your greatest strength and weakness? Now, I have mixed feelings about that because it's a very cliched question. You can take the typical path and you can take something that's really positive about you and you can position it as a weakness. I'm really detail-oriented. And sometimes I'll just spend hours and hours just making some things perfect. I know that shows that I may have a problem with time management, but I really feel like I'm committed to making something as good as it possibly can be before it leaves my desk. You and the person listening to that both know that's absolute nonsense. But it may be that the person who asked you that question wants that type of answer. I would be, I wouldn't ask that question, but if I were the type of person who did ask that question, I would be intrigued to see if the person came up with something that actually was a weakness. And said, I know this, I have a problem with time management, and here's what I've done to work on it. As opposed to just the formula of making, you look like you're itching to say something.
The worst answer to ever give is I don't have one. That's also bullshit like too. If they ask you what's your greatest weakness and you say I don't have one, then it's done. It's kind of over right there.
Okay, well, it sounds like that what you're saying is Donald Trump will not be elected president.
Absolutely.
Very good. Yes, and I'm sorry, again, I don't know your name. Yeah, Paige.
So, you gave the example of MD's oriented, but sort of for time management. It's okay to say something that genuinely is a real weakness that you have, as long as you spin it positively in some way?
Yes, it is. And the key thing is, as long as you can spin it positively, and you are making yourself look like you are courageous enough and honest enough to be direct with the person interviewing you, but you're also letting them know either what actions you're taking to correct it, or again, exactly the way that you put it, that you're putting a positive spin on it without making it sound cliched and just unbelievable. What salary are we expecting? We like that one. So now, I'll be honest, usually if that comes up, I don't think that comes up sometimes it may come up in an HR typically if they think you're so qualified that they're never going to pay you what you want. So they may want to screen you out at the HR level. But somebody who really wants to hire you but is very impressed with you and is concerned that you may be looking for 200 when the position actually pays 80, they may want to ask you that question so that they know, well, look, that's not anywhere near what this position is funded for. But any suggestions on how you respond to that? Has anybody been asked that question, first of all? How did you respond?
Well, I don't know if it's the proper way, but I explained that I'm actually looking to get into a job I love, and I'm not concerned about the salary.
And is that true? You weren't concerned about the salary?
Everything that is out there right now would be getting paid more than what I'm making now, so I'm not really that concerned.
Okay.
So.
Okay, do we like that? I like it.
I was going to say hiring people, I'm sure love that.
Pay me as little as you want. I don't care. No, but I think given the facts that you said, I think that's a good answer.
I think they liked it too. I mean,
Did they hire you?
no, but I got 2 interviews. They went with more experience.
Fair enough. Okay. Somebody else has been asked that question. Paige?
So I've been asked that question, and what I did at the time is I gave what I felt was a good entry-level salary for the job I was applying for in the area that I was in. And once it
Okay, let me stop you right there. So you knew, you had done research on what was an appropriate entry-level position for that area, for that position.
So I later found out that I hadn't researched well enough and I underbid myself significantly. But I got the job, so that may have played a role.
Okay. So you never should have come here because you know I was going to use you. In my experience, most people make the mistake of undercutting themselves and they don't ask for too much, they ask for too little, or is that, with your experience and your experience, would you say that that's the case?
That's pretty much my case. This is actually, that question is why I'm here, because I know that question myself when I've been interviewed. The positions I've hired for have been more, people kind of know sort of what that is, and we've been, in most cases, they've been pleasantly surprised that we were offering more than what they were asking for, and we could go ahead and offer more to try to get but yeah, usually people undersell themselves by a lot, by tens of thousands. But I know it's scary to go in, because I have the problem with having hired people going in and asking for less than I'm willing to.
Yeah, but I think you hit it on the head. It's scary. Get over it. Seriously, because if you find out that you shortchanged yourself and the person next to you has less experience than you, doesn't do as good a job as being paid X amount more, eventually that's going to grate on you. And you'll be pissed off with the company and you'll be pissed off with yourself.
The other thing is, if you oversell yourself by a little bit, if the person really likes you, they may say, well, we can't quite offer you that, and I don't want to disappoint you, but, this is, if they
That-
really like you, they'll go back and they'll try and negotiate for you.
That hits it on the head. Keep in mind that when someone asks you that question, it is the opening of a discussion. It is not, if you say this is what I want, and they want like you, they may ask, is that final, is that negotiable? But keep that in mind. So that's why you never want to sell yourself short. You want to go over by a reasonable amount, not an extravagant amount, what you are willing to take for the position. Okay? Time I spent in fundraising, we always heard that no is the start of a conversation. Think of that, what are you looking for, as the start of a conversation. Because if you're the person they want to hire, they'll talk to you, they'll see if you can find common ground, or they may even see if they can get more funding to bring you in. Now, I'm glad you brought up I was scared to ask for, okay, because I think that's true of a lot of people. So what often happens? Well, then people start to babble. Well, I was looking for this. The thing is, I've got a partner who's out of work right now. We have a mortgage, and forget it. If someone says, what salary are you looking for? Say, I'm looking for 200. That's it. You don't have to say anything else. Okay? If you've done your homework and you know what's a reasonable amount to ask for that position in that area with your level of experience, you don't have to justify it. You can just say, this is what I'm asking for, and then see how they respond. And then again, with the amount of research you've done, the questions that you ask them, you can see if, in fact, is it worth it to go under what you're asking for, given the fact that you were getting what you wanted out of the position, or can you comfortably say, they offered me the job, they didn't offer me the money that I wanted, and I'm walking away, and I feel fine about that. Yes?
You talked about research. What I've tried to do without a whole lot of success. I work in news media in the DC area market. I try to go and look at salary.com or the Bureau of Labor Statistics and try and get okay, here's a median range. But all the times that they pitch that what are you looking for, and something that's like $20,000 or $30,000 more than they're actually willing to pay. Maybe I'm just interviewing for crap jobs. I don't know.
Well, for one thing, I would be careful of national statistics because national statistics don't reflect you're going to get paid more here in New York than you would in Omaha for particular jobs. And there are companies that will pay a fair percentage more or less for particular jobs than other companies within the same market. So that's one thing I would urge you again to use informational interviews, professional associations, and find out about this particular market that you're interested in. And where do they pay there? I think you'll get more reliable data. Paige, yeah.
For me, there's a lot of times where it's like, I would take a significant pay cut for the summer kind of work. Like, an obvious example is, there's some jobs that are strictly 9 to 5, and then you go home and jobs come with you. And there's other jobs where you're sort of on call. And, if I'm gonna be tied to my job, basically 24/7, I would want more money to do that job. Is that the kind of thing I should be trying to find out through informational interviews? Because I feel like it's not often evident to me from the outside how much the company expects from their employees.
That's a perfectly fair question to have in the interview itself, besides your research. Can I, whatever, I have a family, I do this, I have a Toastmasters meeting I go to every Thursday. Would there be any problems with my being free on the evenings, or would you be expecting me to work a certain number of hours, or is weekend work expected? That's as fair to me as saying, is travel expected with this position? And people should be upfront with you about that, because there's no point in hiring you and then having you leave a few months later because they expected you to work at least 60 hours a week, including weekends, and that wasn't what you had in mind. Mm-hmm. Okay. Difficult questions. How do you respond to them? Terribly? Okay, I've got my eye on the clock, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. But when I say a difficult question, it's like, were you fired from your last job? Or have you spent, the last 3 jobs, were you 6 months in those jobs and then you left, and that's what your resume says? Things like that. And someone brings that to you, says, I see you were at your last job only several months. Can you tell me that? Best thing to do, be honest, be direct. But again, you can present that in a way that doesn't show any type of intimidation or shame. If you got fired, you can say something like, yes, I was in that job, and they brought in, the person who hired me actually left right after I was hired. They brought in someone new, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, we didn't get along. We had a very different view of what the job was about, and it turned out it was decided that it would be best that we part company. That's short and sweet and doesn't show that you have any internalized problems with it. It happened. We're all in the workforce. That happens. Things happen and people lose jobs. It doesn't mean that anybody has anything to be ashamed of. So the best thing to do is just be upfront about something like that. And again, don't elaborate. Okay, those are times when you feel trapped, you oftentimes just keep on talking. And that's the time that you want to make sure that you're editing what you're saying and you keep things brief. But if you have something like that you're just hoping they don't ask you, formulate the response to that question in advance and rehearse it, be comfortable with it. So if it comes up, you're not going to worry about how you come across when you say that. Okay, Success Warehouse. Yes. Is that legal for them to ask that? That's what I thought. Well, first of all, no, I would question if you want to work for some place that's going to make that rank a legal mistake of asking you that question. Okay, have you been asked that question?
Yeah.
You have been asked that question?
It was like a 9 to 5 concession stand over. It was like not a career job. It was an hourly and really high turnover at this place.
All right, so something like that,
So it's a really, really entry level job.
all right, I mean, something like that, to a certain extent, I'm going to throw the ball back to you. You are perfectly within your rights to say that's not legal. If you don't want to be that confrontational about it, you can say I was contending with a serious illness, and just keep going, and just let them know I'm not answering your question by the fact that you're not answering the question. But I seriously would also say to myself, do I really want to work here when someone is being this stupid and this insensitive to probe in that area? We talked about a brand, and as you go through your career, and you can do that now, I don't care where you are in your career, have stories that show that you solved problems, the initiative that you took, and the results. The best success stories, it's just like a screenplay. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They start with a problem. Okay? When I got my first job in fundraising, the school that I was working for had just lost 10% of its funding because of state funding cuts. Okay. B, what did you do about it? Go through all the steps that you did. First, I cut expenses by 5%. I initiated face-to-face fundraising for major prospects, which did not cost any more. I was not investing any more money in events or in mailings, And the result. And at the end of the fiscal year, I had actually exceeded goal and increased fundraising by 23% when our original goal was 15%. That last part, that quantifiable results part, is really important. So all of your success stories, tell them with a beginning, a middle, and an end. What was the problem? What did I do about it? What were the results? Even if the results weren't everything that you hoped for, you can say, we were hoping for this, we didn't quite make that, but here's what I learned. Okay? People love stories, but also if you show, I don't sit back and wait for people to tell me what to do on the job. I see a problem, and I work to come up with a solution. And here was how effective that solution was. And keep track of that always. Anytime you have a good story to tell, make sure you keep notes of it so that you can use them in future interviews. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You can't really. Yeah. What I would say is that the results were very good. I can't disclose what the results were, but I can tell you honestly that they were more than satisfactory. And my boss said yada 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 yada. That was you did a great job. You're a real asset, whatever. So that you're not getting yourself in any trouble in terms of revealing proprietary information. We talked about that. Okay, a few words on technique. These are things that I've learned, not just from doing a lot of public speaking, but also, does anybody here belong to Toastmasters, the public speaking organization? Okay, if you are looking to polish your interview skills or general public speaking skills, or just something that's going to make you feel better about conquering a fear, because public speaking is the most feared experience in life, more than death, consider joining a Toastmasters group. But things that you will learn from organizations like that is the first time they lay eyes on you, they're already forming impressions on you. So think about how do you look when you walk in the door. Because research shows you have between as much as 90 seconds and as little as 30 seconds to form a first impression. If the first impression they form of you isn't favorable or even is neutral, you're setting yourself at a disadvantage from the get-go. So keep in mind that you want to make sure that they're going to respond positively to you as soon as they think about you. Stay focused on your purpose. Engaging your audience, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but that has to do with things like stories and also finding the common ground that we talked about with bringing up things like your brand. We talked about hobbies or volunteer work or things like that. Telling stories. And you always be aware of how is this person responding to me. We all know, because we're all smart here, 80% of communication is nonverbal. Are they looking at you? Are they holding your eye contact? Are they looking away from you? Do they seem engaged? Do they smile? Are they looking like they just came off Mount Rushmore? Things like that. Just gauge how that's working. And listen. You want to show them that you can connect your skills, your desires, your experience, your ambition to what they want to accomplish. The best way to do is to listen to what they're saying and look for opportunities to repeat that back to them. And when you do your follow-up, your email thanking them for their time, you will want to repeat back to them in their email, I really enjoyed discussing X, and then do a post sale because that links with my desire to get into that particular field and to leverage my experience in Y. Thinking on your feet techniques, they ask you a question and inside your head you're like, oh my God. One of the things you can do is repeat the question. What would you do if you knew you were going to die tomorrow? What would I do if I knew I were going to die tomorrow? I'd probably find the best martini I could ever find. But just the few seconds that you get when you repeat that question is allowing that level of your mind that's going a mile a minute to produce something that is actually answering the question. But we're having so much fun. Then last thing, know when to stop talking. I don't want to take up more time if we're out of time, but I am here for questions. And thank you all for your input. Thank you all for your attention. If I can be of any further help to you, as I said, I'm here to respond to questions. So please feel free to come up and let me know what questions you may have. Thank you, everybody.